My name is Savannah Brooks. I was 30 years old the morning my mother turned me into a punchline on Facebook. Not in a private message, not in a family group chat. Publicly, loudly, permanently. I was carrying the last 2 storage bins into my new apartment when my phone started vibrating so hard it nearly slipped from my hand. I looked down expecting a delivery update. Instead, I saw a post with my face on it. A smiling photo from Moving Day. The caption above it said, "The 30-year-old leech is finally gone. No more cooking her meals." By the time I read it the second time, the likes had already crossed 1,000. Comments stacked up faster than I could follow. People I hadn't seen in years laughed like they'd been waiting for permission. One relative brought up an old rejection I'd buried. Someone else joked that I was every man's worst nightmare. My sister tagged her friends. My ex liked the post. And the strangest part was that I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. I didn't type a single word. I took screenshots of every comment, every laugh, every smug emoji. Then I liked them. All of them. Because 12 days later, the same people who laughed at me would call in the middle of the night, sobbing, begging, and asking the same terrified question. "Savannah, what exactly did you do?" People love mocking work they do not understand. That was the foundation my family built their opinion on. Because I worked from a laptop, kept strange hours, and didn't wear a company badge every morning, they decided I was unemployed. My mother had repeated that lie for years until even distant relatives spoke about me like I was a cautionary tale. What none of them knew was that I ran a digital risk and compliance firm from my bedroom. It started small when I was 26 after a local boutique owner paid me to fix the scheduling mess in her online store. Then came a contractor who needed invoicing cleaned up. Then a dental office. Then a regional home supply company preparing for an audit. By 30, I had clients in 4 states, 2 part-time contractors working under my LLC, and enough retained earnings to buy my apartment outright if I chose to. I didn't talk about it because I had learned early that success inside my parents' house wasn't celebrated. It was inspected, minimized, and repackaged into something they could still use against me. If I bought something nice, my mother asked who paid for it. If I stayed up late working, my father called it pretend office time. After a while, silence felt safer than explanation. The ugly truth was that my silence also made their lives easier. My father, Douglas, owned a small plumbing supply business that should have collapsed 3 years earlier. He was terrible with digital invoices, payroll software, and tax deadlines. My mother, Patricia, sold handmade decor online and told people she had built her shop alone. But I had rebuilt her entire storefront after midnight more times than I could count. I set up her shipping automations, corrected customer disputes, and quietly answered angry emails under a neutral alias so she could keep playing local entrepreneur at church luncheons. My younger sister Haley was trying to become a lifestyle influencer. I read the contracts she signed without understanding them, caught clauses that would have trapped her into unpaid brand work, and fixed the website she called her media platform. My aunt had a consignment booth she could barely manage. I had cleaned up her sales records too. For years, I was the invisible infrastructure under people who swore I contributed nothing. I didn't live with them because I needed rescuing. I stayed because each time I tried to leave, someone's payment system was about to collapse, someone's rent check bounced, someone forgot a filing deadline, and somehow I got pulled back. My family called it helping around the house. The truth was uglier. I was subsidizing the illusion that they were more competent and more stable than they really were. So when I moved out, I didn't leave dramatically. I left with labeled bins, my standing desk, 3 monitors, and a folder on my laptop called Transition. I had spent 6 weeks preparing clean handoffs for everything that belonged to me. I moved my own client systems first. Then I separated personal favors from professional services. Then I withdrew my credentials anywhere my name had quietly been holding something together. Not out of spite, out of necessity. The morning of the Facebook post, I had already disconnected my backup oversight from 4 different systems. The post didn't create my decision. It confirmed it. That's why I didn't argue in the comments. I already knew something they didn't. They thought I was the embarrassment leaving the house. I was the load-bearing wall. The comments got meaner as the day went on. Someone brought up the time I got rejected from a fast food job at 25, which had happened during the worst stretch of my life after a major contract fell through. My Aunt Sharon wrote, "Remember when she cried over that? Still unemployed." 30 people laughed. My sister tagged half her social circle and wrote, "Warning, this is your future dating situation." And still I said nothing. I sat on the floor of my apartment between unopened boxes and collected evidence. My best friend Madison called before noon. "Tell me you did not respond," she said, skipping hello entirely. I told her I hadn't. She exhaled like I'd stepped back from a ledge. Madison was one of the only people who knew what my business actually looked like. She had seen the contracts, the balance sheets, the long nights, the calls with attorneys. She also knew exactly how much of my family's survival depended on work they dismissed as fake. "Savannah," she said carefully, "they have no idea what they just did." "I know," I said. "That's the first funny thing they've said all year." That afternoon, I went line by line through every place my labor had been blurred into obligation. I revoked device approvals, archived support templates I had written for my mother's shop, and removed my emergency authorization from the payroll service my father never learned to use properly. Then I drafted a clean, professional notice. It was not emotional. That was the beauty of it. It simply stated that effective immediately, I would no longer be providing unpaid digital operations, compliance monitoring, invoice management, storefront maintenance, contract review, or emergency administrative support for any individual or business entity not under formal agreement with Brooks Risk Solutions LLC. If continued services were desired, they could request a contract at market rate, subject to availability. Attached was documentation showing the hours I had provided over the past 11 months, broken into categories. The total came to 1,284 hours unpaid. I did not send it yet. I saved it to drafts and waited. By evening, the post had traveled farther than even my mother probably expected. People from high school were sharing it. A former Sunday school teacher reacted with a laughing emoji, then quietly removed it an hour later when she realized I had liked her comment too. That confused people more than anger would have. Humiliation is only fun when the target performs pain on command. I refused. I spent the night building a timeline instead. Day 1, mockery. Day 3, first missed task. Day 5, second missed deadline. Day 7, systems drift. Day 9, visible cracks. Day 12, panic. I knew exactly when panic would hit because I knew their schedules better than they did. My father had a vendor reconciliation due. My mother had a shipping sync and a chargeback window closing. My sister had a sponsorship deliverable with a clause she had not read. My aunt had sales tax exposure from 3 months of sloppy records I had previously corrected before anyone noticed. When you do invisible work well, nobody sees the disaster you prevented. They only notice your absence when the first leak becomes a flood. By day 4, my mother's online store started slowing down. One of her repeat customers accidentally emailed an old support address that forwarded to me for security alerts only. She wrote a polite note asking why 2 orders hadn't shipped and why tracking numbers were missing. I stared at the email and did absolutely nothing. If I had touched that order even once, I would have reopened the entire system. So I closed the email and made dinner in my own kitchen for the first time without listening for someone shouting my name down the hall. Day 5 brought the first crack at my father's business. Douglas called once and hung up before it rang out, like his pride jerked him back at the last second. Then he texted, "Need login for invoice thing." I read it. I did not answer. 10 minutes later, "Call me." No please, no acknowledgement of the Facebook post. The assumption was still intact. I existed to restore his convenience. I let that message sit beside 30 screenshots of people laughing at my face. On day 7, Haley finally texted. Not to apologize. She wrote, "Can you check a contract real quick?" That was it. No punctuation, no shame. She had helped turn me into entertainment for her friends, then reached for my expertise the moment she needed it. I didn't respond. A few hours later she sent, "Hello?" Then, "Brand needs answer tonight." Then, "Don't be petty." I put my phone face down and went for a walk. That walk changed something in me. The weather was ordinary. Nobody stopped me. Nobody demanded anything. Nobody needed rescuing. For the first time in years, I felt how quiet my own life could be if I stopped volunteering for disrespect disguised as family obligation. When I came back, I found 6 missed calls from home. My mother had finally taken down the original post, but too late. Screenshots were already circulating and at least a dozen people had saved them. That night at 11:58 p.m., I sent the formal notice from my drafts to every adult who had mocked me, used me, or benefited from pretending I was nothing. The final line read, "Effective immediately, all prior informal support arrangements are terminated. Any attempt to access, impersonate, or restore my credentials without authorization will be documented." 12 minutes later, my father called twice. My mother called 4 times. Haley sent 3 messages in all caps. I went to sleep. I woke up to 16 missed calls, 19 texts, and 1 voicemail from Aunt Sharon that began with fake sweetness and ended in raw panic. "Savannah, honey, I think there's been some misunderstanding about the sales report setup." Misunderstanding. People always call it a misunderstanding when they lose access to the thing they thought they were entitled to. Boundaries become confusion. Consequences become cruelty. And suddenly the same people who mocked you in public start speaking in soft, trembling voices like they've forgotten how loud they were when they had an audience. My father's messages were the most revealing. First, "Why did you send that?" Then, "You know I need those logins." Then, "Vendor payment didn't go through." Then, 3 hours later, "This is affecting real business." That line sat on my screen like a bad joke. As if what I did had never been real business. As if 1,284 hours of unpaid labor were little favors sprinkled between washing dishes and disappointing everybody. He had spent years treating my work as imaginary because it came through a laptop and not a storefront with a neon sign. But the second the system started failing, it became real business. Funny how fast people respect labor when they're suddenly drowning without it. My mother took a different route. Patricia moved from anger to wounded innocence with almost professional speed. "After everything I've done for you." Then I was joking on Facebook, and you know that. Then, once she realized guilt alone wasn't reopening her access, the messages became frantic. "Orders are stuck. I don't know what password goes with what. Customers are threatening disputes. Savannah, please." That last message sat on my phone longer than the others, because I had wanted something like that from her for years. Not a dramatic speech. Just a single moment where she spoke to me like a person instead of a frustration. But now that it had arrived, it wasn't healing. It was logistical. She did not miss me. She missed what I prevented. Haley's disaster arrived on day 9. She had signed a content deal requiring milestone delivery, exclusivity, and repayment penalties if she missed posting schedules. 2 months earlier, I had warned her the contract was dangerous. I highlighted the sections that gave the company too much control and offered to rewrite a cleaner version before she signed. She rolled her eyes, called me dramatic, and said I always acted like I was smarter than everyone. Then after signing, she came back asking me to just make sure it's fine. I did what I could at the time, but once I stepped away, the deadlines became hers again. Her texts told the whole story. First, blame. "You knew this was due." Then, anger. "You are literally doing this to your own sister." Then, panic. "They're threatening legal." Then, 10 minutes later, the text that hit hardest. "I can't afford this." No performance, no sarcasm. Just fear. I didn't enjoy reading it, but I didn't rush to save her either. Consequences always feel cruel to people who've spent their whole lives handing their mess to someone else. The real turn came on day 10 when a local customer posted publicly that my mother's decor shop had taken payment for items that never shipped and stopped responding to email. It started as one polite complaint, then a second woman replied, then a third added screenshots, then a fourth tagged the business page. Within an hour, the thread had become the kind of local drama nobody can look away from. Someone recognized Patricia's name. Someone connected it to the old post about her leech daughter. Then one comment changed everything. "Maybe don't mock the person who is clearly keeping your business alive." I did not write that. I didn't need to. The internet had already picked a side, not because people were noble, but because hypocrisy is the one thing social media loves punishing more than failure. A woman from church who had reacted with a laughing emoji under my mother's original post suddenly commented, praying this gets resolved peacefully. A man who had joked that I should learn to be useful deleted his comment. My aunt sent a voice note so shaky I had to replay it twice. Savannah, sweetheart, if you could just please log in one more time and fix the filing issue. I know things got ugly, but we're family. There it was. Family. The emergency exit word. The magic key people use when accountability starts closing in. Nobody had said family when they were roasting me for entertainment. But now, suddenly, blood mattered again. By evening of day 11, Madison sat beside me reading through the texts in silence. Her face moved from curiosity to disgust to something colder. They are not calling because they love you, she said quietly. I know, I answered. They're calling because the scaffolding came down. She nodded. Then don't confuse collapse with remorse. That sentence lodged itself in me like a steel pin. It would have been easy to hear their panic and mistake it for awakening. Easy to believe desperation was the same thing as regret. But people cry for many reasons. Fear, shame, exposure, financial ruin, the possibility that the person they mocked has finally understood her own value. That night my father sent the message that changed the emotional temperature of everything. Not because it was kind, because it was honest. We may lose the house. I read it 3 times. I had seen the signs months earlier when Douglas shoved a spreadsheet at me and told me to just glance at it. I had spotted a second mortgage under pressure, inventory being overordered, and cash flow being patched with denial and timing tricks. I warned him then. He got offended and told me to stop acting smarter than everybody. Now he was texting me that they might lose the house. Not because I had created a crisis, but because I had stopped disguising one. I opened the screenshot folder and laid the first image beside the newest messages. On one side, the 30-year-old leech is finally gone. On the other, please call. We're desperate. Nothing had changed about me in those 11 days. Not my intelligence, not my work, not my value. The only thing that changed was that they were finally being forced to live without the parts of me they had spent years pretending did not exist. At 8:14 the next morning, day 12, I answered the phone. My mother was crying before she even said my name. Real crying, not performance. You can hear the difference. One asks to be witnessed. The other is too broken to care who is listening. She rushed into the silence. Orders were frozen. Refunds were piling up. Her business page was flooded with complaints. My father had missed a payment window with a supplier. Haley's contract issue had escalated into a formal notice. Aunt Sharon owed penalties from unfiled records. Everybody was blaming everybody. I just need you to tell us what to do, she whispered. That sentence landed harder than any insult she had ever thrown. The woman who had presented me as a dependent child in front of the internet was admitting that 4 adults could not function without me. No, I said quietly. You need to understand what you did. She began apologizing in fragments. She said the post got out of hand. She said she was angry I had moved out and wanted people to think she was relieved. She said she didn't know I had done that much. That phrase made my jaw tighten. That much. Like my labor had still not earned a full sentence. So I gave her one. I told her exactly what I had been doing for years. I named the systems, the contracts, the alerts, the chargebacks, the filings, the payroll corrections, the fraud flags, the website outages I fixed at 2 in the morning, the sponsorship terms Haley ignored, the vendor mismatches my father never learned to read, the customer disputes I de-escalated under fake support names so Patricia could tell people her business ran itself. I told her that while she was joking online about cooking my meals, I had been preventing her store from being shut down by negligence. While Aunt Sharon mocked a rejection from 5 years earlier, I had protected her from tax exposure 3 separate times. While Haley used me as a warning for her followers, I had saved her from signing away 3 months of unpaid work. You made me into a joke, I said, because admitting I was the most competent person in that house would have forced all of you to look at yourselves. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said the words I had wanted since I was about 17 years old. I was wrong. No deflection. No excuse afterward. Just that. It did not fix anything, but it was real. An hour later my father called and asked to meet in person. His voice sounded older, not wiser, just stripped. He did not order. He did not demand. He asked. I agreed to meet them that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. Before I left, Madison asked one question. Are you going there to save them or to be heard? I looked in the mirror at a face that seemed calmer after 12 days of chaos and said, to be heard. Good, she replied. Then don't leave with a new unpaid job. They were already seated when I walked in. My father looked like he hadn't slept. My mother had makeup on, badly applied, the kind people wear when they want to hide crying and only make it more obvious. Haley sat stiff-backed with swollen eyes and a legal envelope half hidden under her hand. For once, nobody performed normal. The table looked like what it really was, a family standing in the rubble of a lie. My father spoke first. We handled this wrong. That was as close to humility as Douglas Brooks had come in 20 years. He admitted he had relied on me far more than he ever acknowledged. He admitted he didn't understand most of the systems I managed and had resented needing help he couldn't control. He admitted the cash shortage he had been hiding had become impossible to cover. Then my mother did something I genuinely hadn't expected. She took out her phone and showed me a drafted public apology, not yet posted, waiting. It named the original post. It admitted it was cruel. It admitted her daughter had been mocked publicly and that she had participated. I wanted you to see it first, she said. Haley started crying before I finished reading. She said she knew I had warned her. She said she tagged her friends because she thought it would get laughs and make her look witty. I didn't think of you as a real person in that moment, she whispered. That hurt more than almost anything else. Not a sister, not a woman building a life. Just content. I could have stood up and left. But revenge that actually changes your life is not always about the sharpest exit line. Sometimes it is about forcing the truth to sit in the middle of the table until nobody can look away. So I told them what came next. I was not moving back. I was not restoring unpaid access. I was not fixing everything by midnight out of guilt. If they wanted my professional help, they would sign contracts, pay retainers, accept boundaries, and communicate through proper channels like any other client. Family did not mean permanent access to my labor. Love did not mean public humiliation followed by private extraction. Respect was no longer optional. It was the price of being in my life at all. My father asked what the retainer would be. Not with sarcasm. With defeat. I gave him the number. He looked physically ill, which was almost funny when I considered how freely he had spent my time for years. My mother asked if there was anything they could do besides pay. Yes, I said. Tell the truth publicly, the same way you lied. She posted the apology right there. My sister posted one too, shorter but direct. My aunt called while we sat there, and for the first time in her life, my mother put her on speaker and said, "You're apologizing to Savannah, not me." I listened as a grown woman twice my age stumbled over basic accountability and finally managed it. Did that erase what they had done? No. Did it matter that enough people saw the shift? Yes. Enough understood who had really been carrying whom. Over the next week, the missed calls stopped sounding desperate and started sounding careful. Contracts were sent. 2 were signed. I took my father on as a limited-term client under strict scope because his mess affected the roof over Haley's head, and I wasn't interested in watching disaster consume people simply because it could. I refused my mother's store unless she hired a real fulfillment assistant and let me build boundaries that couldn't be bulldozed by guilt. Haley asked for help negotiating her contract mess, and I referred her to an attorney instead of rescuing her myself. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done, and one of the healthiest. People do not grow when you keep cushioning the consequences of their contempt. That evening I went home, opened the screenshot folder, and moved it into an archive labeled lessons. I didn't delete it. Healing and forgetting are not the same thing. I stood in my own quiet kitchen, poured a glass of water, and realized nobody in the world was entitled to call me a burden again. Not because I had proven my worth through money. Not because they finally saw my usefulness. But because I had finally stopped handing other people the authority to define me. If there is a lesson in this story, it is this. The people who laugh the loudest at your life are sometimes the ones standing on work you did in silence. Never confuse invisibility with uselessness. Never let cruelty dressed up as family humor tell you what your value is. Self-respect is not loud in the beginning. Sometimes it looks like screenshots, silence, and 12 days of letting the truth arrive on schedule. But once you choose it, everything changes. And the people who thought they could shame you forever usually discover the most expensive loss of all is not money, not reputation, not even a house. It is losing access to someone who loved them enough to hold everything together while they were busy calling her a joke.